The top-rated recruit in TCU's 2023 class, wide receiver Cordale Russell, has filed paperwork to enter the transfer portal. We'll talk about that and more next. It's Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day.
You are Locked On Horned Frogs, your daily podcast on the TCU Horned Frogs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
That's right, Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. I'm your host, Steven Simcox. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. You can also subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever it is that you listen to podcasts in its, original intended form, just audio only. News today, Cordale Russell, who was the top-rated recruit in TCU's 2023 class, number 13 rated receiver in the nation, according to 247 Sports, in that high school class. He has announced his intentions to enter the transfer portal. Mike Roach from 247 Sports had this story yesterday evening. On Thursday evening, it started to trickle out that this was going to happen. And so portal opens on Monday. There is still a chance that Cordell could come back theoretically. And by that, I just mean like it's a possibility. He has the ability to withdraw his name from the portal or stay at TCU. But it doesn't appear like that's the case. It feels like this is a relationship between him and the coaching staff that for whatever reason has kind of soured. And I think there's different ways to look at it. There will be some people that say, well, Cordell didn't have any catches this year. He didn't really have any production. He played sparingly. I mean, he had a few snaps in a few games. And so, you just move on. Don't worry so much about guys that don't see the field. And I totally get that. In my mind, it's concerning. There's a concerning trend here. So Jordan Hudson, a couple of years back, he ends up being a factor on that team that went to the national championship game. I mean, he got significant snaps in the playoff game against Michigan, the Big 12 championship game down the stretch. He was someone that they trusted. And then he entered the portal in that first window, withdrew his name, went through the spring, ended up entering the portal again, and went to SMU. Now, Jordan didn't set the world on fire at SMU. He had an okay season, wasn't killing it with production. But this is now 2 years in a row where one of your top skill guys that you recruited and went through the process with has moved on. Part of this is the world that we live in college football. I mean, if guys don't see the field, if they feel like they're talented and they should and can play immediately, and they don't get on the field, especially for a team that's struggling at a position of need, wide receiver, he had some injuries this year. He had some players that weren't exactly lighting the world on fire when they were playing and hauling in passes. And so I'm not there at practice. Like, I think to a certain extent I have to defer to the coaching staff and what their decision-making is. A lot of you chimed in during the season and said, well, hey, why isn't he getting an opportunity to get out there on the field and just go make some plays? Like, send him on a go route or send him on a fade pattern. Send him on some simple routes that he can process and understand, give him the ability to get the ball in his hands, maybe throw him a quick screen, something to just get him moving. There have been rumblings that there was some immaturity going on with Cordell, that he didn't fully understand the offense and he wasn't really grasping things and processing things at the level he should, which, I mean, that's what's being said. I can't fully speak to it. I would caution people and just say, I'm sure that to a certain extent that's true. I mean, he's a young guy and it's hard learning new verbiage and new offense, and he did miss some of spring practice. So I'm not going to totally doubt that. I would also just tell you that things like that are probably going to leak out, and part of that's a coaching staff spinning a narrative to let people know why this happened, right? Like, this is, from an outsider perspective, this doesn't look great. And so they're going to give you an explanation as to why this went down and what the reasons were. And it's probably going to be a pretty one-sided explanation that puts a lot of the responsibility on Cordell. I think it's a tough thing because you want to give him snaps, or you want to give a player snaps, a talented player for sure. And if they're not getting it done in practice and not producing and not living up to expectations, then you don't want to reward them with playing time. But at the same time, I feel like giving someone some playing time and showing them like, hey, we believe in you. We want you to be a part of this, but you have to buy in. That could be a motivating factor. Ultimately, though, that's not what happened. And even towards the end of the season, when TCU was out of the Big 12 championship mix and just kind of fighting for a bowl game, Cordell wasn't really getting burned. Even as there were some injuries at that outside receiver position, he wasn't seeing the field. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of interest in him in the transfer portal because it was super talented in high school. And I guess my biggest question is about right now would be about the evaluation process. Like, I'm not going to panic in the short term. I was hoping and I thought he could be a factor next season in the 2024 season, that if he improved and put things together, he could be someone that could see more playing time and could give you some production. But like, bottom line was he didn't really play much this year. And so you're not replacing anything that's happened on the field. You're trying to replace depth and potential. And those things are not easily quantified. So it's not like you're losing a receiver who had 600 yards in his freshman season and is now parlaying that to try to cash out in the portal and make some NIL money. At the same time, though, like I said earlier, this is now a couple seasons in a row where you've had big name guys, like guys that have kind of headlined your recruiting class, leave. One of them was on the field and was a contributor. One of them really wasn't in his freshman season. But like if Cordell was a raw player who didn't have a lot of polish with route running, and maybe he was going to struggle to, grasp some of the concepts that you were running, did that come up in the recruiting process? Like, is that something you accounted for? There's no perfect prospect. And I know all these guys have different strengths and weaknesses. It's just kind of curious to me that suddenly, there's all this talk about, well, he just, wasn't ready, didn't put the work in, all those things. Okay. How much were you guys like trying to help speed that process up or make that happen? I can't speak to that. I don't know. Bottom line is he's not going to be on this team next year. It doesn't look like, and that's unfortunate. And it does kind of give you some concerns about the development. And nobody's immune to this cross college football. I mean, you see just about every team in the nation. If players are not playing early and often, they're going to move on and try to go somewhere else because that's what everybody wants to do. They want to be on the field, right? And so that's a challenge for every team. But it does seem a little more pronounced for TCU right now as Russell is moving on. I mean, I think there's depth in the receiver room. I feel like they're going to be okay. But I would like to see some better returns from developing guys and getting them ready to play in the first couple of years in the Sonny Dykes system. They've done really well with experienced players, like that group that they inherited. And let me say this, like there's a belief going on right now. I've seen some comments about this on YouTube too. Well, Sonny just won with Gary's players. Sonny won with a very senior heavy class and with a lot of guys that Gary couldn't get to a bowl game. He got him to a bowl game one time in their career before Sonny showed up. And they couldn't play because of a COVID outbreak. But like, he wasn't lighting the world on fire with the talent in the room. And what we're seeing now from a rebuild perspective, a lot of that falls on the previous staff and the mistakes they made and recruiting and the misses that they had. But that being said, Sonny kind of has to answer this question now. How are you developing talent, especially at the skill position, at the wide receiver position, and getting them ready to play early and often so that they are, content and buying in and believing into what you're doing and sticking around? Because this is now 2 straight years where you've had a guy move on who was a pretty star-studded name. A couple other guys that are hitting the portal. Chance Biddle, who was also a highly rated recruit from the DFW area. A few years back, he was part of that first class that Sonny and company brought in. And Chance didn't play a ton this year. He did have a forced fumble against Nicholls State, I believe. But I feel like towards the end of the season, you saw Jamal Johnson getting some opportunities, or Don Fontenette getting some opportunities, and Biddle wasn't really on the field. So I think, he just kind of looked at the writing on the wall and said, well, hey, if I'm not going to be here and not going to be getting snaps, and there are players that have less experience and have been here in the program, less time than me that are getting those opportunities, then maybe it's just time for me to move on. And then Jasper Lott, who was a tight end in high school, went to Argyle, one of the, premier high school football programs at the 4A level. And they had him at tight end for a little bit. They moved him to offensive line. They kind of would shuffle him back and forth. Never really cracked the depth chart at either position. So Jasper Lott will also be moving on. Best of luck to all these guys. I mean, I don't wish ill on any of them. I hope Cordell finds what he's looking for, and that the team that gets him can get him on the field and develop him well, and they can make things happen. And I hope the same for Biddle and Lott. These are just players that are looking for other opportunities. And in some cases, maybe it's good for both parties to just separate and move on and have a fresh start. But Cordale Russell, the big name so far, this is the transfer portal. We'll keep an eye on who else might enter their name in the coming days and weeks. When we come back, Frogs landed a commitment for the 2024 class at the wide receiver position. We'll talk about that next. It's Locked on Horned Frogs, your team every day. FanDuel. They have a great deal going on right now. FanDuel.com/lockedon. You make a $5 money line bet. You get up to $150 in bonus bets. You got to win that $5 money line bet, but if you hit on it, you'll get up to $150 in bonus bets. That's $150 of free money just for a $5 investment. Did you watch that Cowboys-Seahawks game last night? That was fantastic. I did a high school football game. I was broadcasting a high school football game. I was driving back from Midlothian, Texas last night, and I'm listening to that ball game. Just two teams going mano a mano, trading blow for blow. You can bet on games like that on FanDuel. They're the official betting partner of the NFL. Put down a $5 money line bet and get $150 in bonus bets if your team wins. They also have an app that's super easy to use with a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and continue to roll through the NFL season. A lot of games coming up on Sunday. There's games Thursday night, pretty much every day of the week, except for Tuesday, Wednesday. You have NFL options to bet on at FanDuel.com/lockedon or the FanDuel app. Place that $5 money line bet today. If you hit on it, which I'm sure you will because you're a smart person, then you'll get $150 in bonus bets. Take advantage of this deal before it goes away. FanDuel.com/lockedon. TCU now has 20 commits for their 2024 class as they flipped a player last night. Doozy Ezukama, wide receiver from Timber Creek in Keller, Texas. Good size on Doozy. He is 6'2", 180 pounds, tall, lengthy. And Ezukama is a former Oklahoma commit. He was committed to the Sooners for a while, decommitted earlier this week, and then lands at a local school in TCU. If that name Ezukama sounds familiar, his brother Eric played for Texas Tech from 2018 to 2021, and then moved on and played for the Miami Dolphins. And so they add his brother Doozy to the fold. Doozy Ezukama, the wide receiver from Timber Creek, who flips from Oklahoma and lands on the Frogs. He's a speedster. He runs track as well. Had a really impressive offer list. As I said, was committed to Oklahoma. Also had offers from Arizona, Arkansas, Houston, and many more. He's a long jumper and a triple jumper. In his junior season, he had 587 yards on 42 receptions and 6 touchdowns. He returns kicks and punts, or did at Timber Creek. He has offers from Kansas State, from Texas A&M. He's officially a 3-star prospect, according to 247 Sports. But again, really impressive offer list, and was originally, committed to OU. And so he'll get ready to take the field with Malcolm Kelly and company coming up this upcoming season. He joins Jakyle Baker, the 4-star wide receiver from Brownsboro, who is also in this class. And don't look now, but suddenly TCU is 30th in the nation. Now, I know that's not like top 10, top 15, There are going to be people that are disappointed by that. And I understand there were expectations for a lot of folks that were like, hey, we're coming off a national title appearance. If there's a season where it looks like, we should get a huge recruiting bump and we should be in play for some big time names, it would be this cycle. And they went after some big names, and they got a few of those. I mean, Haas Haney is a blue chip 4-star quarterback, Elite 11 finalist, right? Kyle Baker, who I mentioned earlier, is a 4-star prospect. They have a couple of really good skill players at the running back position as well, and Jeremy Payne from Missouri City at Hightower High School. Also Nate Palmer from Decatur, who I'm curious to see how they use him. He's kind of undersized, and he was used in a lot of ways when he played there at Decatur. They put him in the slot a lot. They throw the ball out to him. Travis Jackson, the edge guy. Here's what I like about this class, though. If you look at the position breakdown, you've got 20 commits. You've got 5 offensive linemen and 3 defensive linemen. So you're going with the trenches here, and you're going with a lot of guys in the trenches that are frankly kind of developmental players. Tobias Steps is kind of a raw player, but he's got outstanding size and length. He's a 3-star talent. They went and found Wesley Harvey from Oklahoma. Ryan Hughes from the Woodlands was an early commit to this class. Crease Brister from Stephenville. Travis Jackson, who I mentioned earlier, on the defense side of the ball at the defensive end position. They're going after O-line and D-line, trying to bulk up those rooms, because you look at this season what happened on the offensive line. And with a lot of those guys graduating and moving on, that's going to be a thin room. They're kind of thin along the defensive line as well. And if you're going to stick with this 3-3-5 scheme, which it feels like they're going to, as Joe Gillespie appears to be returning for next year, you have to recruit with the fact in mind that you're going to have to find a way to get, rush and push from your 3-down line sets, which means you need big, nasty defensive linemen. And they're going after those types of players and hoping to develop them. And then you're getting more highly rated players with high ceilings at those skill positions like wide receiver and running back. But Duzi Azukama, they flip him from Oklahoma. And really, this is the first big recruiting news we've had in a while. They've been pretty quiet. We also are paying attention to what they're doing in the transfer portal, kind of how they're reacting to some different things. Eric McAllister, the wide receiver from Boise State, will be coming in potentially if they can land him. And maybe with Cordale Russell moving on, they go and get one more wide receiver out of the portal just to add some depth to that room. And specifically that outside wide receiver position moving forward can be somewhere where they can, be effective and have a lot of different options. But Duzi Azukama, the wide receiver from Timber Creek, 3-star talent with a really impressive offer list and was originally committed to Oklahoma. He joins the fold as TCU continues to build this 2024 recruiting class. Some audience comments coming up here in a moment. You're on Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. So I threw an episode up on Wednesday, I believe. Yesterday, if you missed it. So TCU basketball, they're going to take on Georgetown tomorrow. And I had Andy Patton on from Locked On College Basketball talking about this Frogs basketball team. 6-0 to start the year. We know what the competition level's been but it's going to ramp up a little bit starting this weekend. And so he talked about TCU basketball. He talked about the Big 12, kind of gave us a national look. We talked about big picture, recruiting wise, building a team, what the philosophy is with that. Brett Yormark in the Big 12 and how he kind of sees basketball as an untapped revenue resource. So all of that is on the Locked On Horned Frogs YouTube page and also wherever you get your podcast. But on Wednesday, KJ Jefferson hit the transfer portal. And I talked about how if I was TCU, I'd get on the phone and see, hey, what would it take to get KJ Jefferson to Fort Worth? Because he is a big-time talent, great size, a real traditional dual threat in that he can run the ball and use his power and speed to get downhill. And most of you disagreed with me, which is okay. But here were a few of the responses that we got. Let's see. KTM Idaho said lots of good QBs entering the portal. Lots. Let's go get them. Matt Rule says it takes $2 million to get a good quarterback out of the portal. I don't know how that works, but he thinks we got the money. Yeah, there's a lot of good QBs. And, the tough thing with QBs, which I've been talking about, is you mentioned the money aspect. So there's the monetary aspect. There's also just the fact that it's a position on the field where there is one person playing. So it's a scarce resource, right? And if you're not guaranteed a spot or a roster spot, a starting spot, then a lot of these guys kind of tune out and move on. And so I think that's going to be the bigger challenge for TCU aside from the money piece. But there are a lot of great QBs out there. Riley Leonard from Duke hit the portal yesterday. Now it appears that he's going to end up at Notre Dame. Supposedly that's kind of a done deal, even though that certainly sounds like tampering with Mike Elko moving on. He was looking at his options, and so he can start doing that on December 4th. But there's a wide variety of players and talent in the portal. Just, have to find a way to go get them. Zoom Play said no, he doesn't think KJ Jefferson. They should go after Grayson McCall. Grayson McCall from Coastal Carolina, who played with Jeremy Chadwell, the head coach, who's now at Liberty. And so I think Liberty will be a factor there. But Grayson's been outstanding. He's been a really experienced starter. He kind of fits that mold of what I was talking about the other day, where I think, or at least I hope, TCU will start to go after more experienced players regardless of competition level. So even if it's someone that's got a lot of snaps at the FCS level or at, the group of 5 level, they took a lot of flyers on guys this past offseason with maybe injury history or players that were, not super productive at their last stop, and banking on the fact that hopefully they can put it together and get it done. But that didn't work out for various reasons. And so I do think that experience is a factor. Grayson McCall certainly fits that bill. He's another guy, though, that it seems like he's kind of looking to SEC first. And that's the same thing with KJ Jefferson. I don't get the impression, at least early in this recruiting process, that TCU is going to be much of a factor here. And I'm not sure if that's lack of interest on their part or his part, but their name hasn't really come up aside from people that are kind of connected with the program that just put the Kendall and KJ connection together. Jacob Langford said not in favor. Also wouldn't be terrible if KB went to Mississippi State. Yeah, haven't really heard any promising things on Kendall, taking a role at Mississippi State. Feels like Jeff Lebby is going to call plays as a head coach. So I'm not sure what his role would be. I mean, he could be OC in name. It would just be a different responsibility than it has right now. But yeah, I know your thought is shared by a lot of Frog fans. If he decided to move on and it was just kind of a mutual parting of ways, that would be really good for all parties. And thanks for your feedback on not wanting to take a flyer on KJ Jefferson. Matthew Welker said, Stephen, I do appreciate your coverage of the team. I personally found the team very frustrating, especially the defense. Max essentially willed and carried the team to the 2022 championship with his play. We could have had 2 losing seasons in a row without the miracles of 2 seasons ago. He wants to see more player development overall. Well, thanks for your feedback, man. I appreciate you watching the show. I disagree with you. I think Max was really good in 2022. He had a lot of weapons on offense. Quentin Johnson, Kendre Miller, Amari DiMercato, that offensive line were all huge difference makers. But his leadership made a big difference. I thought the defense was much better 2 years ago than it was this past year. This past year was a total disappointment in my mind. I felt like they did a relative to expectations last season. They did a nice job of adjusting in games and making things happen. And so I saw the potential of the defense last season. I didn't really see it this year. But, yeah, I totally get your point. Defense has to be better. But I think part of that, too, is their identity. They just want to be an offensive team. And because the offense was so bad this year, it affected the defense as well. Joe Frog 91 says his BU boss thinks Kendall will join his brother-in-law at Mississippi State. I mean, could happen, but haven't heard anything to that effect right now. So not really projecting anything to go down in the moment. But, yeah, that connection certainly makes sense as they are, family and have worked together for a long time. Thank you for rocking with me this week and this year, however many episodes you've watched. I appreciate it. Thanks for your feedback as always. If I didn't get to you, I'm sorry. It's a Lockdown Horned Frogs. It's your team, and we do it here every day.